Hi everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes to me from Louis Wallenberg, who says, Steve, I'm not sure if you've answered this question before, but I've got the feeling that you have. How do you compare the original Cosmos to the modern one that is still airing? The original seems like it was written and directed, not actually sure if it was or not, by Carl Sagan, giving it his character and personality. The modern Cosmos seems to be just directed attempt at to copy what has already been done, giving none of its own flavor to something that had already been done perfectly. Oh, I disagree with you there. I think the new Cosmos definitely has its own character and its own flavor, its own things to add to the story. Clearly, it is based on the original version. Obviously, if Carl Sagan had not done his version of Cosmos first, this version would not exist. I mean, the title, the Spaceship of the Imagination format, the cosmic calendar, which they're actually using in the new version way more than they ever used in the original Carl Sagan version. I mean, they returned to that cosmic calendar over and over again in the new version. And just the limited number of episodes, the 13 episode run, the combination of history and science, and the viewpoint, the perspective of linking science to you personally. It's not just another episode of Nova. It's not just an episode of The Universe on the History Channel or something like that. It's making it clear how not only are these some cool scientific facts or some cool stories about great scientists in the past, but this relates to you. This is our story. This is a human story. This everything is related to us. And that's all taken from Carl Sagan's Cosmos. But there are some really wonderful original touches to the new Cosmos. I really like the use of animation. I know some people haven't been crazy about that, but using the animation avoids the need to use cheesy live actor reenactments when you're telling the story of, Michael Faraday, for instance. So I like the use of animation. Obviously it's different with Neil deGrasse Tyson because I don't think he has as much creative input into the show as Carl Sagan did, because Carl Sagan did co-write the original series. And the subtitle of the original series, let us not forget, was A Personal Voyage. The subtitle of the new version is A Space-Time Odyssey. But nonetheless, they have incorporated personal aspects of Neil deGrasse Tyson's story, particularly his relationship with Carl Sagan, into this new version. And that not only reminds us of the original version that so many of us still love to this day, but also draws a connection between that version and the new version and the host and the face and the voice of that new version. So I think that's a really well done element of it, and I was pleasantly surprised to see them return to that as well. They didn't just do that as a one-off in the first episode and then speed away from it and do their own thing. They have returned to the ghost, the legacy of Carl Sagan and his relationship with Neil deGrasse Tyson repeatedly through the series to this point, which I felt has worked very well. So yeah, I mean, the music is different. Some people have criticized Alan Silvestri's score of the new Cosmos. I think it works really well. Really lush, romantic, cinematic music. I think it works terrifically. Obviously, the special effects are of a different type, of a different level than they were in the original that Sagan was able to provide. So I'm a big fan of the new Cosmos. I have enjoyed it immensely, and even though I think that the limited series format is a part of what makes it so special, I am going to definitely miss it when it's over. And I think it's brought enough of its own stuff to the table. It definitely doesn't feel like a retread. It definitely doesn't feel like an also ran or like just something like a pointless remake of something that people know. I feel like it's really a well-done series, and it's told a lot of stories, especially the historical stories, that you did not hear in the original Carl Sagan version. So it's a lot of new material in addition to the changes in presentation and things like that. I disagree with you about the new Cosmos. I do think that the original version is just about perfect. I love it. I can't tell you how important it was to me as a child seeing that original series. It will always be special to me, but I'm really enjoying the new version of Cosmos on its own merit. Masked Malfrey Dear Steve, who are some of the major writers that have inspired or influenced you in your work? Also, was there a particular moment in your life that you realized that you were going to pursue writing as a career? Thank you. I don't know if there was ever a moment where I thought I would pursue writing as a career. I did sort of develop that dream through my adolescence. I don't know if there was a particular moment. When I was young, I guess the two books that I read that really made me think, oh wow, I love writing and I would want to do this, were The Catcher in the Rye and The Great Gatsby, which are still my two favorite books to this day. I mean, I love both books. I think they're wonderful books. I think the writing is exquisite. I love, for all of his faults and all of his eccentricities and excesses and tendency to personally indulge himself, I think Salinger is a beautiful writer. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald is a beautiful, beautiful writer, a wonderful user of the English language. And Joseph Conrad, too. I remember really loving Joseph Conrad in high school. I devoured as much of him as I could. And then when I got to college, I loved the writing of Frank Norris really reached out to me and spoke to me. And I also discovered the poetry of Emily Dickinson, which means a lot to me today. I thought, wow, why wasn't I reading this all along? Because she's such a popular poet and everybody knows Emily Dickinson. And I never really got into her until I read her in college. And it really just resonated with me very strongly. So those are some. I don't think there was a moment when I thought that I would be a writer or I thought that it would be a career for me. Maybe when I started writing myself, when I was about 13 or 14, I started writing stories. That maybe that was it. But there are so many writers. You know, there are like Annie Proulx is a beautiful writer. I read a collection of Annie Proulx's short stories a few years ago, and I thought it was wonderful. Michael Chabon, I think, is a terrific writer. So, you know, there are older writers and more modern writers that continue to inspire me and continue to make me both make me feel like very inadequate and sensitive about my own writing, because I'm like, wow, I'm nowhere near that good. But also inspire me and remind me of why I love writing and why I want to continue writing things. Hoyen Rolf, question. Hi Steve, does the overuse of certain words irritate you? For me, words like awesome, actual, and actually are in that category. It's not that I have anything against those words being used appropriately, but some people tend to overdo it. Maybe I'm obsessing a bit here, but I find myself avoiding those words and even correcting others for misuse. That sort of thing doesn't really bother me in extemporaneous conversation. If I'm talking with someone and they just happen to use those certain words over and over again like a verbal crutch, it doesn't really bother me. Most of the time I won't even notice it. But in written words, it jumps out at me and it really, really bothers me. That's one of my pet peeves that's one of the things I think is a sign of bad writing, is overuse of words, leaning on a very small vocabulary and constantly repeating the same words, especially filler words like actually or, you know, however, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's a sign of bad writing and lazy writing and unedited, unproofread writing that you haven't gone over and made sure sounds good and sounds as good as you can possibly have it. It's a big, big pet peeve of mine when I'm reading. Now, when I'm listening to people, again, most of the time, unless it really stands out, unless it's really obnoxious, I don't even notice it. It doesn't bother me. They're getting a delivery across the street. Luke Larson, Steve, which Star Trek series is your favorite and why? Which series do you believe has the most interesting main cast? My favorite Star Trek series all around is Deep Space Nine. I think that's been my favorite pretty much since it was first on. I love Deep Space Nine. I love Captain Sisko. I think Avery Brooks is an overactor, very much on par with William Shatner and Patrick Stewart. It's very important, to me, as I view Star Trek, in a Star Trek show, to have someone who is a talented overactor, and Avery Brooks is definitely that. He was well cast. And Deep Space Nine, it was really uneven. I know I've said this a lot in these videos when I talk about it, but it was a very uneven show. There were some episodes of Deep Space Nine that were just awful. But then when it was good, it was so, so, so good. And I mean, like the Deep Space Nine episode, The Visitor, from season 4, I think, where Jake Sisko, like Captain Sisko, gets trapped in some sort of bullshit Star Trek thing, like a warp bubble that separates him from everybody and essentially makes it look like he has vanished. And his son Jake spends like the rest of his life trying to find him and bring him back. And it's just a really a very off format episode. It just follows Jake through the rest of his life. It covers a span of probably like 50 years or something. And it's just a beautiful story, very emotional. There were many episodes of Deep Space Nine and many moments between the characters of Deep Space Nine that were very emotional, very deep, and had lots of complex feelings being dealt with. And that was the sort of thing that Next Generation, and certainly the original series, didn't really do very often, if at all. For all of their value and for all of the wonderful things I could say about the original series and Next Generation, and the less said about Voyager and Enterprise, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, Deep Space Nine was my favorite. And it had a great cast, both of actors and characters. So I would probably pick that as my favorite cast as well. Although I do think that no subsequent series after the original series ever quite replicated the chemistry and the unity of the three central characters of the original Star Trek. And maybe that was intentional. Maybe they avoided that threesome at the center of the story because they didn't want it to feel even more derivative of the original series than it would be anyway, just for being a Star Trek sequel series. But there's an undeniable and unmatched in the Star Trek universe power of those three characters, of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and their unity and their dependency on each other, and their friendship and their love for each other and their loyalty to each other, that really drives both those episodes of the original series and then the films as well, that make reference and make great use of that trio at the center of the stories. And none of the sequel series ever really quite replicated that kind of strength and that kind of chemistry in the cast. So that's something worth considering as well. That original Star Trek cast, as goofy and as silly and as cheesy as that show was, and as bad as it was, usually in a good way, but as bad as it was, there's something about the power of that original cast and the way especially those three central characters related to each other, that has never been matched by any of the subsequent shows. Richard Parker. Hey Steve, I have grown up disliking gay people most of my life because of religious beliefs. About 2 years ago, I stopped believing in God, and of course now I don't have a problem with gay people. Although sometimes I struggle with understanding why gay people choose to believe in God if in the Bible God clearly hates gay people, or at least what they do. A lot of gay people claim God made them gay, or God loves them just the way they are, etc. Any thoughts or advice on this situation? This question is in no way me trying to offend people. If someone happens to be offended, I am sorry. Well, I don't take it as offensive. I think you're asking an honest question. I have similar thoughts. I do sometimes wonder, because I see gay Christians who fight so strongly for their place in that faith, and I wonder, why would you even want to be a part of a church that worships a God that hates you, or that, to take the more charitable view, that doesn't accept you, that tells you have to change before you can be accepted. And the way you are, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing about you that should compel you to change. There's nothing wrong with the way you are. You're not hurting anyone being whatever orientation you are. I wonder that too. But I prefer to look at it this way. I think that I would rather have gay people in Christianity fighting against the bigotry and the homophobia, trying to put forward a version of that God and that doctrine, that theology that is all-inclusive, that is loving, that is compassionate, that counsels acceptance of people where they are, no matter what orientation they are, no matter what their sexuality, whether you happen to be comfortable with it or not. I would rather have those people there making that religion better, reforming the warped, corrupt, awful morality of that faith than not have them there. I think my view on gay Christians who don't take the self-loathing route, who are trying to rehabilitate the view of their faith on homosexuality. My take on them is that they are making their religion better, and I am grateful for that. Ahoyerno question. Several of my colleagues are very religious. They're mostly like anyone else, but it's the little things. God is mentioned on any occasion. They tried to convert me. Now my wife is pregnant and one told me he'll pray. I had to bite my tongue. This colleague knows I'm an atheist. Why does he do that, and how should I respond without losing the job that provides for me and my family? Well, yeah, obviously you don't want to lose your job. I don't know what all you have tried up to this point. I mean, if it was just people saying they'll pray for you, I would be willing to just ignore it. I mean, sometimes people say they'll pray for me, and I take it in the spirit that it's given. I mean, there are people who I know personally who found out I was an atheist and said, well, we'll pray for you. And I didn't make a big deal about it. I said, well, you seem like you mean well. Go ahead. You know, I mean, it makes absolutely no difference to me whether you pray for me or not. But if it's really that obnoxious, I mean, if it's crossing the line into harassment, you know, you don't want to make a big scene out of it. You don't want to lose your job. But it might be worth maybe just having a friendly but serious conversation. You know, not don't be hostile. Don't be like, listen, asshole, I've had enough of your shit. Just in a friendly but serious way. Say, look, this. I know maybe you don't realize it. Maybe you don't mean it. Maybe you think you're trying to help. But this is really making me uncomfortable. It's obnoxious, and I wish that you would not do this. I wish that we could work together and that you would not make this an issue between us. I have no idea if that would work, but it might be worth having that sort of gentle, friendly, but firm conversation with the people who are talking to you like this. Cranes Not Skyhooks. Hey Steve, why specifically do so many people hate Brett Ratner? What qualifies him such a bad filmmaker? I thought Red Dragon was better than Hannibal, at least structurally, although the latter was much more elegant. As for X-Men The Last Stand, how much of that was his fault? Is he a weak director or a hack or what? I'm really curious as to why he attracts so much hatred. Thanks, and you're one of my favorite YouTubers. Thank you. Brett Ratner is a hack, and he is a weak filmmaker, and he's certainly not the only one. He's certainly not alone, and he's certainly not the worst filmmaker in the world. But I think the reason why he attracts so much animus is because he has been so commercially successful, despite the fact that he has no identifiable style. He has no art. He's an artless filmmaker. He has no panache. I mean, even someone like Michael Bay or like McG, who I would put in the same category as Brett Ratner, as filmmakers that I just have absolutely no use for at all. I'm not a fan of their work. It doesn't do anything for me. But at least they have identifiable visual styles. They might be really obnoxious, bullshit, awful visual styles. You might look at Michael Bay and go, oh my God, you know, there's not like a shot longer than a half a second in any of his films, like the rapid cross-cutting, the incredibly obnoxious sound design, the adolescent over-sexualization of every female character in sight. Like, at least those are hallmarks of Michael Bay. You can identify it as a Michael Bay movie. You might hate it, but he has a style. Similar with McG. You might think, oh, it looks like a fucking music video, right? You might hate it. You might think this is fucking bullshit, but you can identify it as a McG film. You can identify it as a Zack Snyder film. There are stylistic hallmarks, even among bad filmmakers. Brett Ratner doesn't really have any. Brett Ratner is kind of like a chameleon. And not in a good way. Not in the way that, you know, well, he's adaptable. No, he's more just like a copyist. He's a directorial plagiarist. He takes from better filmmakers and he just does what they do. He watches Bryan Singer's X-Men movies and says, I'll just kind of do that, when he took over X-Men and he did X-Men The Last Stand. He looks at the work of a truly talented filmmaker like Jonathan Demme and says, oh, I'm going to make my Red Dragon, I'm just going to try to make it look as much like Silence of the Lambs as I can. he has no. I think that's why he's so reviled. Is that it's not just that he's a bad filmmaker. It's not just that he makes shitty movies. It's that he doesn't even have a style. There's not. What is a Brett Ratner shot? What is a Brett Ratner scene? What does that look like? What does that sound like? There's no such thing, because he's nothing. He's artless. He's formless. He just does whatever, and that's why I think there's so much negativity toward Brett Ratner. That, and the fact that despite that, he has been hired to do these incredibly high-profile, successful projects. I think it's that. I think it's that. And I think that means that it's time for
the lightning round. Rapid-fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
That segue was so bad, Brett Ratner could have directed it. First up from Yoav Fried. So, as a follow-up question for circumcision, do you think it should be banned? And if so, how can you ban it without hurting Jewish traditions and kind of limiting the freedom of and from religion? Yeah, I do think it should be banned, actually. I mean, I'm not super passionate about it, but now that you mention it, I see no reason why you should be allowed to mutilate the genitals of a child. And I don't think religious freedom enters into it. Religious freedom does not extend to the point of allowing you to cause harm to another person. If it hurts the feelings of people who treasure that religious tradition, I really don't care. And neither should the law. It has nothing to do with me. You should protect the rights of those who need to be protected. Andrew Willett. Hey, Steve, love your videos. Anywho, I also find 9/11 conspiracy theories to be preposterous overall. However, there is one piece of evidence presented by the 9/11 Truth Movement that I still find a little jarring. The BBC Live report on September 11th, where it was announced that WTC-7 had collapsed when it wouldn't collapse yet. And even stranger, it is still obviously present in the live feed. This doesn't really sell me on 9/11 conspiracies, but it seems a bit puzzling. Thoughts? World Trade Center 7 had been long expected to collapse that day. The firefighters had pulled out, and they were just waiting for the building to collapse. And it actually stood a lot longer than they thought it would. They assumed it would collapse much earlier in that afternoon than it did. So I think that BBC report was just an instance of them jumping the gun. I mean, the collapse was widely expected. It was sort of an any moment now type of thing. And somebody misheard somebody, or somebody just was a little too excited, or maybe they had a report prepared for when the building did collapse, and it was just read prematurely. I don't think it means anything. I don't think it means there was a conspiracy. I don't think it means that the BBC was in on the conspiracy. I mean, these are just weird anomalies. They mean absolutely nothing. And if you try to press a 9/11 conspiracy theorist as to, okay, so the BBC reported that the building had collapsed when it hadn't, what does that mean? And even most 9/11 conspiracy theorists won't be able to tell you what it means, because it means nothing. They just think it's suspicious, and it has to mean something. But it doesn't. It's an anomaly. It means nothing. It was somebody who made a mistake. J.A. Christine. Hey, Steve, here's something that I've been curious about over the past few weeks. Given your obvious interest, maybe even passion for science, did you ever consider going into a particular area of science as a career option? And to follow up, why or why not? Would science journalism ever even be a possibility that you could consider? Thanks. I think writing about science at the popular level would be something I'd be good at, but I kind of feel like that should be reserved for people who actually understand the science at a professional level. I don't know. I mean, I'm a great popular science guy, but I don't really have a very complex understanding of it as a scientist would. Most of that stuff is over my head, and the reason it is mostly because of the math involved. I never really seriously considered having a career in the sciences because I just don't have a very good head for math, and you need to have a good foundation of math to have a career as a scientist. I mean, I know my biology professor in college said, no, biology is great because you can have very advanced degrees and you don't need to know the math. But I kind of think you do a little bit, don't you? I think he kind of was underselling himself. Jen Virtue, where do I post my question for this series? Zen Humanist. Hi, Steve. Will you be watching the World Cup this summer? Thanks. No. Jesse Steck. Steve, what is your favorite movie monologue? Mine typically come in Act 3 of a movie. Scent of a Woman, A Few Good Men, and Network, to name a few. Mine might actually come in the first act of a movie. I really love Alec Baldwin's speech in the beginning of Glengarry Glen Ross. I think that's beautiful. I think it's so funny and awesome. What else? I love Daniel Plainview's taunting of Eli at the end of There Will Be Blood. Everybody always thinks of the "I drink your milkshake" line, but to me the money line in that is when he gets right in his face and goes, "Drainage! Drainage, you boy!" Zrin T, so you're saying that The Office would have been improved by Jim dying as soon as they got married? Yeah, I guess. Or maybe them not getting married, or not even getting together, or getting together but not staying together, or the show ending right after they got married. There are a multitude of ways in which you could have improved The Office, as it relates to Jim and Pam. Johnny Fendricks. Hey, Steve, quick question about everyone's favorite morning beverage. How do you take your coffee? And do you have a favorite brand, or just one that you generally prefer? I have a cup of coffee right over here, actually, that I've been sipping on as I've been shooting this video. I take my coffee black and hot, like my men. And my favorite brand is 8 o'clock, although I'll drink pretty much anything. Oh, it's so nice. How do you start the day without it? That is it for the questions. That's the final question of the lightning round. Before I get out of here, as always, I'm going to do a shout out. And the shout out this week is to a really, really great channel. And one of the main reasons I'm giving this channel a shout out now is because I feel like if I don't give it a shout out now, I will miss my chance to give this channel a shout out, because this channel, I feel like it's about to blow up. It's about to get super huge. The channel is GirlDoesRant, and this is a channel, if you've seen this channel, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the girl with the long blonde hair, the white mask, the sort of digitally altered voice. She does atheist videos, and it's just an awesome channel. She's so smart and articulate and intelligent, and makes some great points, and does great response videos to people where she really takes arguments apart and presents her own point of view in a really direct, succinct, eloquent way. It's just an awesome channel, and she is about to blow up. I get the feeling. She just had one of her videos featured on the Amazing Atheists channel about a week ago, and she's been gaining subscribers at a very good clip from what I can tell. When I checked this morning before I shot this video, she was at around 11,000, and that's going to get a lot bigger in a very short time, I think, because she's got an awesome channel and a great look, a very distinctive. She does everything you should do if you want to attract attention to yourself on YouTube. She's smart, she's funny, she's great. She has a very distinctive look. She makes very high quality content, and I get the feeling you're going to be hearing a lot more about GirlDoesRant. So while I still can, in the short interval where I still have more subscribers than her, I want to shout her out and recommend her to you. Check out the channel, and if it's your cup of tea, please subscribe. Be one of the torrent of subscribers that are no doubt coming her way this very moment. Very good channel. Really enjoy GirlDoesRant. So, that's it for this week. I will be back again next week to do this all over again. Please leave a comment on this video, because in order for me to do this, you have to ask. I kind of fucked up my spiel there at the end, didn't I? I kind of got ahead of myself. Maybe I need to drink some more coffee. But for me to do this, for me to answer these questions, you have to ask. So please leave a comment on this video for next time. Ask me your question. Ask me anything about anything. This is where you leave the question for the next video. Leave a comment right down below on this video. Ask me anything about anything, and I will answer as many of them as I possibly can next time. So until then, I will see you next time. Have a good week, everybody.